Why CPR dummies need boobs. I recently posted a short about CPR training mannequins or dummies having breasts, and I was really actually quite surprised by the reaction. You see, the point of that video was quite simple. Women are less likely to receive bystander CPR, and the hesitation before they receive CPR costs lives. The point of that video was essentially to make people sign a petition to enable us to make sure that CPR training is done on mannequins with and without boobs. But some of the comments on that video, in fact, quite a lot of the comments weren't about CPR at all. And what I didn't expect was how quickly the conversation stopped being about CPR and started being about feminism. Apparently, according to some of the comments, women being less likely to receive CPR is somehow the fault of feminism. Or it's because women don't want men to look at them. Or, and this came up more than once, this is what happens when women say that they'd rather choose the bear. Under all of this was something actually a bit more serious. There was a repeated theme. Men were scared to give women CPR because they might be falsely accused of sexual assault. So, I'm a scientist, I like evidence and stats-based research, so let's look into the statistics. Instead of getting dismissive or being defensive, I want to actually unpack all of these stats properly. Because if fear is influencing whether someone steps up during cardiac arrest, that's not trivial, that's life and death. So let's start with the false accusation fear, because this came up time and time again in the comments. False accusations happen. And when they do, they can be absolutely devastating. No reasonable person denies that. Being wrongly accused of something like sexual assault would affect your job, your family, your life, your reputation, whether or not it ends up in court. And so yes, that fear exists, and I understand why people were raising it. But let's look at the statistics. Is this realistically likely to happen? According to research from the Home Office, about 4% of sexual violence cases that are reported to police are found or suspected to be false. Studies across Europe and the United States consistently show rates between 2 and 6%. That isn't zero. Clearly there are false accusations. It is consistently low. That means, on average, for every 100 claims of sexual assault, 96 of them are true. 96 out of 100. 4%, or 4 of them, are false. It's also important to understand that the statistics on false reports can sometimes include cases that were recorded as unfounded or no crime. Often that means that there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. That's very different from proving that an allegation was completely fabricated. The inability to prove a conviction may be based on other things like the amount of forensic evidence. It is not the same as proving that the claim in itself was false in the first place. So the number is actually probably lower than 4%, especially if you think about the fact that many cases of sexual assault don't get reported in the first place. So that 4% is actually probably an overestimation. Now, a study produced by the Crown Prosecution Service in England and Wales looked at a 17-month period between January 2011 and May 2012. During that time, there were 4,651 prosecutions for rape and 35 prosecutions for making false allegations of rape. Now, I don't deny that those 35 false allegations are hugely harmful to the men who suffer them. But I do want to ask, why are we spending so much time focusing on 35 when 5,651 were prosecuted? This doesn't support the idea that false allegations are common. On top of that is the shocking fact that for men and boys, they are 230 times more likely to be sexually assaulted themselves than falsely accused of sexual assault, which is an interesting stat for people making comments like this and this. What is rarely talked about is that the false reporting rates for sexual violence are no higher than for other categories of crime. But victims of burglary or theft are not routinely treated with the same suspicion. So when we zoom out and look at the broader data, the narrative that false accusations are happening constantly everywhere at epidemic levels simply isn't supported by evidence. Why does a single video asking people to sign a petition to ensure that we have male and female mannequins to practice CPR on get so much emotive responses from mainly men in the comments accusing me of ignoring the impacts of false allegations on men? I don't want to dismiss people's experiences. So like a good scientist, I went specifically looking for documented case in the UK where someone was prosecuted or taken to court for sexual assault that they performed during CPR. I cannot find one, and I looked in good faith. Now, there's often one case that's mentioned from China, and when you actually look into it, the details are quite unclear. It didn't result in a prosecution, and reports at the time also suggest that the woman's family supported the man who performed CPR. What's also worth saying is that much of the outrage that was seen around this case seemed to stem from online comments rather than any formal legal action. And some of those comments were frankly absurd. Things like, why didn't he massage her stomach instead? As if that's how cardiac arrest works. When someone's heart has stopped, chest compressions are what circulate the blood to the brain, not rubbing someone's stomach. Now, hindsight commentary from a keyboard doesn't help anybody. This man acted heroically, and there really is nothing more to it than that. There are also viral stories that people brought up in the comments about men saving women from cars and later being accused of assault. But those stories, when you actually look into them, they don't appear in any reputable news reporting. This specific case refers to Daniel Reed, and he was charged apparently with sexual harassment for grabbing Jessica Moore to pull her back from a speeding car's path. Can I just pause there and say, Daniel Reed, Jessica Moore. Reed, Moore? It's just not true. The video that circulated with this story is actually showing a man grabbing a woman before she's hit by a car in 2020 in an incident in Cincinnati, Ohio. The Instagram video that carries the false claim mixes publicly available videos that are not related to the Cincinnati incident. The man in the real case is named Chris Allen, and he wasn't arrested by the Los Angeles police for sexual harassment. It's always worth checking your sources. It's really easy to amplify online stories until they feel common, but actually, when you dig into this one, there was no substance to it. So I invite you, if you are so sure that giving CPR to women may well result in false accusations of sexual assault, look into it. Bring me a bit more evidence than this one person in China and another example of a man saving a woman from a speeding car's path that didn't actually happen. If you are so sure about your opinion, I would like to hear it. That is what good scientists do, right? We change our opinions based on the data and the evidence in front of us. At the moment, the evidence is overwhelming. Cardiac arrests are happening everywhere, every single day. Men and women die. So let's address the feminism angle, because this came up a lot. Now, some of the comments suggested that this is the natural outcome of women saying that they don't want to be objectified and being vocal if they've been sexually harassed. And so then I think the logic behind it is that the natural progression here is that men should just stop helping altogether. There is a very obvious difference between giving someone CPR and sexual harassment. People in real life do not mistake giving CPR for sexual assault. No reasonable people. You can literally break ribs or the sternum doing CPR. CPR isn't intimate, it's not flirting, it's not sexual. It is an emergency medical procedure that's performed on somebody who's unconscious and clinically dying or dead. If someone is in cardiac arrest, this isn't a moral grey area. CPR is literally pushing the center of the chest hard and fast to keep oxygenated blood flowing around the body and to the brain, and maybe even to trigger the heart to restart beating through the movement and that mechanism. The idea that respecting women and saving women are somehow in conflict says more about how we frame women's bodies than it does about CPR and the risks involved. And then there's these kind of comments and these kind of comments. The choose the bear comment. For context, if you haven't heard about the bear, this was a viral meme where a group of women were asked whether they would rather be alone in the forest with a random man or a bear, and most women chose the bear. It sparked huge debate online, and I'm not going to talk specifically about those kind of responses, but actually ask you, what does it have to do with CPR? I guess the logic here is that some women expressed fear in a hypothetical scenario, and therefore men shouldn't help them in a real medical emergency. It almost feels kind of like a punishment, as if the response to some women feel unsafe in certain situations is, fine, don't expect help. And by the way, turning a meme about risk perception into a justification for withholding life-saving care is, I don't really know what to say about it. So let's bring this back to the statistics. According to Resuscitation Council UK, there are approximately 115,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests reported to ambulance services in the UK every year. Less than 1 in 10 people survive. Clearly, there is a need for education about CPR full stop. Now, about 80% of these cardiac arrests happen at home. So statistically speaking, if you ever perform CPR, it's more likely to be on somebody that you know, a partner, a parent, a sibling, a child. Now, the British Heart Foundation reports that 43% of UK adults have never learned CPR. That's about 23 million people without these skills. But 70% of students who are asked who have been trained say that they would feel confident to act in an emergency. This tells us something really clear. Training builds confidence and expertise. AED use rates are even lower, between 8 and 10% in the UK. Now, quick CPR and defibrillation are often the difference between life and death. So where do the dummies or the mannequins come in? Research published in medical journals, including the American Heart Association's journal Circulation, has shown that women are less likely to receive bystander CPR in public compared to men. Researchers have cited discomfort when touching breasts, fear of causing injury, and fear of accusations as contributing factors. The technique for CPR doesn't change based on sex. You press on the center of the chest. The presence of boobs doesn't change the protocol. But discomfort and unease because you've not practiced it before can change behavior and cause hesitation. And if someone's only exposure to CPR training has been on a flat-chested mannequin, and the first time they encounter a female chest is during a real emergency, hesitation is much more likely. And hesitation costs time, and that costs lives. Including breasts on training dummies doesn't reduce the attention and care we give to men. This is not political, it's practical. It normalizes anatomy so that in a real emergency, your brain focuses on the compressions and not hesitations and discomfort. To be honest, we could take this point even further and have pregnant mannequins as well. How do you put them in the recovery position? How do you give them CPR? And just to alleviate some concerns and address something more directly, most countries, including the UK, operate under Good Samaritan principles. If you are providing emergency medical care in good faith, the law recognises that context. The Social Action, Responsibility and Heroism Act of 2015, that's the SARA Act, requires courts to consider if the defendant was acting for societal benefit, responsibly or heroically when determining negligence or breach of statutory duty. The point of this law is basically to reduce the fear of liability, so all the comments about being sued come into play here. So here is where I want to end this. If you genuinely believe that a hypothetical accusation is more pressing than a statistically common cardiac arrest, I would gently ask you to think about people in your own life. Because 80% of these cardiac arrests happen at home. If a woman you love collapsed tonight, would you want the person standing next to them to be hesitating because they hadn't trained on the right mannequins? Would you want to hesitate if it was your mother, your daughter, your sister? The research suggests that without training on mannequins with boobs, you might hesitate. So when you say in the comments you might just walk away or you'd put your hands in your pockets, remember you are not just talking about strangers, although it blows my mind that that is your response when we're talking about strangers. We're talking about your family. I've linked certified CPR resources in the description below. One major critique that people gave me in my other video was that I didn't show people how to do it. There is a video that you can click right here to watch how to do it. I am not a first aid trainer, so I'm not going to be teaching you, but there's no difference. You just need to practice on both so you don't hesitate, but your hands go to exactly the same place. Please learn CPR. I will include a video link to the demonstration in this video so that nobody leaves saying that they don't know what to do. And if you're in the UK, please sign this petition to improve CPR training and representation in dummies. Share it, increase visibility. If you're outside of the UK, considering starting something similar like this in your own country. But either way, share this video, share the petition and subscribe, because this isn't about feminism. It isn't about political. It's not about winning an argument. It's about whether somebody's heart starts beating again. And that is a hell of a lot bigger than a comment section on YouTube. So if you value evidence-based conversations like this, subscribe, share the video, and let's keep talking.